So at this point, the police have already been called. I can hear the sirens in the background. I heard the sirens the moment I opened the front door. Um, and it was a conversation between my husband, myself, and my son at that moment. And it wasn't necessarily for our safety. I have no fear. There was no fear that the police were going to come barging in and start shooting at my house because of a gun. But the fact remained, and we had mentioned, we talked about it a little bit. It was extremely important that my son understand that these officers were going to be coming into a situation where a gun was involved. And it was his responsibility to assure every one of these officers that they were not in danger. I have had a lot of questions about having all of the officers and their guns drawn on my son until he was handcuffed. Yeah, if my husband were a police officer, he damn well better have his gun drawn, because it's a gun. There's no issues there whatsoever. And the officers that showed up at the scene were incredible. So the officers, I think there were two cars that pulled up, guns drawn, and they were asking who was the shooter. At this time, and I guess I need to explain that my husband actually put the gun back in the safe before he came up to get me. There was nothing odd about that. We have very strict guidelines within our home. The guns are never left out. So considering the fact that my husband was probably in absolute shock, his adrenaline was the adrenaline overload that had taken place, I can't even imagine that he would have had any conscious thought process to anything. And so yes, he immediately took the gun from my son, immediately put it back in the safe. It's a very large steel constructed safe that all of our guns are in, and that was his. That was just something that would normally be done. So it does not surprise me in the slightest that that is exactly what he did with the gun once he took it from my son. So there was no gun when the police arrived. So the police were stating, who's the shooter? And my son held his arms in the air and calmly stated, it was me, it was the shooter. So as you can see from the video, we do have quite a few steps that need to be taken down the stairs. And as a mother, I think I might have been in a little bit of shock as well. I want to make it known that I did walk backwards down the steps in between my son and the officers. I'm not sure why. I think it was very important for me that my son did not become fearful. I was not afraid that they were going to shoot my son. He didn't have a gun. But I also needed those officers to understand that we were complying with their requests. And I could tell that my son was in shock. So it had nothing to do other than with me being the mother that I am. I wanted to ensure that I was helping him down those steps in between the officers, and I stayed with him until he did get within distance, and he laid on the ground. And once the officers were able to come up towards us and handcuff him, I had walked away. It just needed to be, it could have been a lot worse, so it needed to be that way. So they did cuff him and they put him in the back of the car.